Hi, my name is Amy O'Donnell and welcome to the first month of the instructions for the Bernina World of Sewing Feathered Friends Quilt Along. We're so happy to have you join us and we're excited to get started. This month we're going to be making the center block of the quilt. It consists of flying geese blocks, half square triangles, and some 4-patch units. We're going to be using the Stripology Ruler, the Deb Tucker trimmer, the Deb Tucker wing clipper, and the strip stick ironing tool, which makes ironing a whole lot easier. These are the fabrics that I used in my quilt. I made the purple shop sample. These are my fabrics along with the background fabric that I chose. And before we get started, I highly recommend that everyone make up their own personal color key. Take your fabrics that you've got and cut little pieces of them and glue them to a piece of paper and keep it in your project box. That is really going to be a big help when it comes to figuring out what colors to use every month. The other thing that's helpful is the design board. This is a piece of foam core board that I glued some batting on. I want to take a minute or two and review how the Stripology Ruler can be used to help in this project. I've got two Stripology rulers here, and for those of you who are not familiar with Stripology, this is the Stripology squared ruler, and it consists of a piece of plastic like a typical ruler, but it has slots cut in it every ½ inch. So on the Stripology squared ruler, you can cut pieces in ½ inch increments all the way from 0 to 12½. There are also lines on here to allow you to square up your ruler, square up your fabric blocks, and there's also diagonal lines and other things to use. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there about the Stripology ruler and how they can be used, and I can't even scratch the surface in this 5 minutes that I'm going to talk about Stripology. But if you have a Stripology ruler, it can be a great tool for this project because there are some months where you need to cut repetitive 2½ inch squares or 5-inch blocks or whatever, and it can come in just super handy. So this is the Stripology squared, and this is the Stripology XL. Okay, so this is the extra large version of the Stripology ruler, and as you can see, the Stripology squared will cut from 0 to 12½, and this one cuts from 0 to 20. So you do get a little more runway on the Stripology XL, although the amount of fabric you can cut widthwise, like from top to bottom, remains the same. So it all depends on, if you're going to get one, it all depends on what you intend to use it for. And it is important that you store them properly because these are kind of fragile and they need to be hung up or put somewhere secure so that you don't break them. And they're not cheap, so you want to make sure when you get one that you do store it properly. On the XL and on the Stripology square, there's a very nice finish on the back, like a sandpapery thing on each of the strips, which really helps to hold your ruler in place when you're doing the cutting. So I just wanted to kind of show you that in case you were not familiar with Stripology. You can cut full widths of fabric. You might think, oh my gosh, just how can I cut widths of fabric when this is so short, from here to here? But you really can cut widths of fabric with the Stripology ruler, and I'm going to show you how. Let me set this aside for a moment. So here I've got just a piece of fabric. This is a full width of fabric, and I've got it pressed and everything, and I've already evened up the edge. But if I had scraggly pieces hanging off here, I would be able to clean it up, and I'll show you how in a minute. But you want to cut a full width, you want to take your fabric and fold it over, and you want to have your fold meet your selvages, just like this. Kind of smooth it out, and then you want to just lay it on your cutting table. Now mine has already been evened up, so I'm going to line my cut edge right up on a line. I've just chosen an arbitrary line on my cutting mat, and I'm going to smooth it out. And I'm going to use the Stripology squared for the purposes for the rest of this presentation, but I'm going to put the 0 line on my cut edge. So I've got my cut edge on a line on my mat, and now I've laid my ruler on top, and I've got the 0 line lined up with that perfectly. So that's my starting point. So let's say that we need to cut some 2.5-inch squares just for fun. Everybody, or 2.5-inch strips. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to start at 0 and we're going to cut at 2.5. And the full inch slots are marked by the big dots, and then the 1/2 inch are in between. And on the bottom down here, the 1/2 inch are marked by stars along the edge. So I'll try to take a close-up picture of this with my camera so you can see it. So I'm going to cut 2.5. I'm going to stick my blade in, and I'm going to do 5, and I'm going to do 7.5, and that will give me 3 2.5-inch strips. Okay. Now, when you first get your Stripology ruler, that cut didn't quite go through. When you first get your Stripology ruler, you want to make sure that it can be kind of tough at first to get the. Well, I didn't do a very good job on that at all. It can be kind of tough at first to get your blade in the slots, and so they can be a little stiff. But once you use it a little bit, it comes out good. So let me show you what we're going to do now. So we've got 2.5-inch strips, and you're going to say, well, but I want 2.5-inch squares. So you can just lay it out here, and you put your selvage just right here on this side of the line, because we're going to cut those selvages off, of course. And I'm going to line up my 2.5-inch strips, just like this. Line them up nice and smooth it out. And I'm going to lay my ruler on top again. And this time I've got my 0 line lined up so I can cut these selvages off. So I'm going to cut through the 0, and that's going to even up. And then I'm going to cut some 2.5-inch squares. Now, if I had the XL on here, I could have kept going further and further, but I just want to show you for demonstration purposes. So here's my selvage pieces that I cut off, and then here are all my 2.5-inch squares that are cut and ready to go. So I just wanted to give you a little demo, and if you buy the Stripology ruler, you say, well, what if I have to cut 1 1/4 or, 1 3/4? There's a 1/4-inch line on here that allows you to adjust and back it off, so that when you make your cut, it'll have that extra 1/4 inch or the 1/4 inch less than what you're looking for. And it tells about that in the booklet. I'm not going to go through that right here and now. But if you have a Stripology ruler, I just wanted to show you in case you've not used it, or if you have a friend who has one that you want to borrow one from, or if you want to buy one, you can get a discount, 10% discount if you get one to use on this project. But anyway, this is what it looks like. This is the Stripology squared, and this one is the big boy, the Stripology XL. So think about if you want to get one or not. I just wanted to present that option to you, but it can make your cutting more efficient and more precise. So give it a thought. Thanks. Next, we're going to talk about cutting our fabric. This is the background fabric, and these are where you should make your first and second cuts. On your dark fabric, this is where you should make your first cut, and then your second cuts is on there also. So cut at the 2.5 and then at the 3, and then you should be able to proceed from there. The cutting on the light medium is self-explanatory, as is the cutting on the medium fabric. You're just going to be cutting 4 3-inch blocks. For the light fabric, make your first cut just below the 3-inch line there, like we've shown, and then the second cuts are self-explanatory. The first block we're going to make are the 4-patch blocks. And you take your fabrics, your background fabrics, and your light and your dark, and you arrange them as shown. Stitch together your two sets of pieces and press the seams toward the darker fabric. Sew the 2 patches together in a 1/4-inch seam and make sure the seams are nested. Then you can press. You can press your seams open, or you can press them all to one side, depending on what your preference is. But make sure the seams nest. It creates that nice point. Now it's time to make our half-square triangles. Take your background fabric and draw a diagonal line from corner to corner. Lay your squares right sides together. With batiks, this isn't as much of a concern, but lay your squares right sides together. Sew a 1/4 inch on each side of the red line as shown. This is a good opportunity for chain piecing. And I have my stitch length shortened to about 2.0 since we're trimming. Next, you want to cut on that diagonal line, and this will create two separate half square triangles. Press your half square triangles to the dark side, so press the seam over to the darker side, and now it's going to be time to trim them up. Using our Tucker trimmer, we can lay each half square triangle under the ruler and have the diagonal line up on where our fabric seam is, and then you can trim across the top and turn your square and then trim again. This is a great opportunity to use your turning cutting mat if you have one. And here are all of your finished half square triangles. Maybe not all of them, but a set of them. Next, we're going to make our flying geese blocks, and we're going to make these using the 4 at a time method. Take 4 of your background pieces and draw a line down the middle from corner to corner and lay them on top, face down on your dark background, I think that's a 5-inch square. Yeah, 5.5-inch square. Lay it face down, right sides together, and line up those lines. And then we want to stitch a 1/4 inch on each side of the line. So I've got lines of stitching going down. And once again, have your stitch length shortened because we're going to be trimming these. And you can see they are cut apart. Press the pieces with the background fabric pointed away from the dark fabric and with the seams headed toward the background fabric, just like you see in the picture. Lay your other 2 squares with the lines on them as shown on these partially finished flying geese. And you want to scooch it in a little bit from the edge like I've done there in the picture. And it says that in the directions too. And you want to sew a 1/4 inch on each side of that green line. And then we're going to cut these apart on the line. And now it's time to trim using our Deb Tucker wing clipper. So position the flying geese on your mat with the point down, and you line up the ruler, put the point on the point mark, making sure your edges are covered, and you make your first trim. We're trimming these to 4.5 by 2.5 unfinished. So there I've made my first cut on the top. You can turn the block and make your second trim with the point pointed up. And this is another great opportunity to use your turning cutting mat if you have one. And there's your finished flying geese block. For the final assembly, everybody has their own way of doing things. Some like to do it by row, and some like to start with the center block. It's really up to you and what you're comfortable with. And I'm just going to show you pictures here of how I did mine. I have my pieces up on my design wall, just kind of showing you how it's going to go. Have my half square triangles and my 4 patch units all lined up. Here's another picture of that. Here's a shot of the back of my quilt so you can get an idea of how I've pressed my seams. You can press your seams however you want, but I tended on this quilt to press a lot of my seams open to reduce the bulk. And there's our finished center block. It should measure about 16.5 by 16.5. And, you know, that's the first month of the Feathered Friends Quilt Along. So I hope that the video has been helpful to you. And I look forward to next month when we're going to do the 1/4 triangle square border. Thanks, and have a great month. And don't forget to get into our Facebook group if you have any questions or concerns, or drop me an email if you need to at amy27614@gmail.com. I'll be happy to get back with you. We want you to be successful with this quilt. Have a great day.